Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, and I've got a really exciting guest on the show today. He's an anti-war activist, he's a fellow libertarian, and he's an author. Scott Horton. How's it going, Scott?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for having me, dude.
Yeah, totally. So typically you don't need an introduction, but there are some people who watch my channel who might not know who you are. So you want to just give us a really condensed summary of what you do for work and how long you've been doing it and what got you active?
Sure. Well, I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute. I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. I'm the host of Anti-War Radio on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA. And I do the Scott Horton Show. I got 5,000 interviews going back to 2003, almost all on foreign policy stuff. And I wrote the books back there, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. And the brand new one is out, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism.
Perfect. So I'm actually lucky to get you today because there's news that Biden is supposedly ending U.S. support for the war in Yemen. The war in Yemen, from my limited knowledge, is kind of the worst thing that we've been supporting because none of these wars really have any good basis to be in or support or anything. But this one is just like so blatantly wrong. We're just starving millions of people to death. And, you know, Trump sort of ran on ending the wars. And this was his biggest fumble. He could have ended it as soon as he became president, but instead he ramped it up. And then he vetoed the resolution to end the war. And then he also pulled us out of the Iran deal, which is, as you have pointed out, is kind of why we got into the war in Yemen in the first place, to appease the Saudis. So Trump just completely went the wrong way on this. And it's looking, from what the media is saying, that Biden is actually making the right move. So I wanted to get your opinion on what's going on. Is Biden actually doing the right thing, or is this all smoke and mirrors, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think he is doing the right thing, and not completely, but he's going definitely the right direction on this. And so the announcement was we're ending all support for the Saudi war against the Houthi regime in the capital city of Sana'a there. And then he said, well, but, you know, we're going to always provide defensive support for our friends to protect them from drones and missiles and things. So I saw on Twitter, you know, some people were taking that as just, oh, yeah, well, you could drive a whole war through that loophole because they call whatever aggression they want, they call it defensive if they want to, you know. However, I didn't read it that way. To me, what that sounds like to me is, well, we're going to give them, they should not worry. We will give them all the Patriot missiles and all the Iron Dome type defensive interceptors that we can help them with for that side of the war to help prevent the Houthis from getting any good strikes in on them. But we're not going to help them hit the Houthis anymore, was what he was saying. I more or less take that at face value. The question is, to the extent that they really mean it. You know, part of it is, the question is, to what extent are we really supporting them now? It was the case that our Air Force was providing all the refueling for their fighter jets on the way to where they're going. But they ended up buying refueling tankers from Boeing and getting the training from the Americans on how to do it themselves. And they're not using American refueling tankers anymore. So at this point, the support, and there are degrees that I don't know, I guess. I'll admit that up front. I don't really know. But from what I do understand, the support amounts to, we keep selling them planes and we keep selling them bombs, and we have military and civilian intelligence and mercenaries providing for all of the logistics and the intelligence of the war and the maintenance and the care and feeding of all of the airplanes and all of the armaments, and all of that stuff is done by American, you know, military, mostly contractors, and British contractors working for BAE Systems especially. And Boeing has huge contracts for essentially running the whole war for them. So if what Biden means, if he means what he's saying at all, then what he means, and we'll know very soon whether he means what he's saying. If he means what he's saying, he means that will all come to an end. And presumably he would elbow the Brits, that he wants them to knock it off too. They're the junior partners in this thing with us. Now, if he doesn't mean it, he might say to the it might be another kind of nudge. Hey, Brits, triple your support for the same war because I got politics here I have to deal with. And then the war goes on, right? But we'll be able to tell the difference real quick about what happens there. And then if he wants to really follow through, he needs to say to the Saudis and the UAE, you guys need to wrap it up too, right? We're the superpower. They're the client state. And so calling off our support is a very polite way, should be only the politest way of saying we insist, we expect your war to also end, very soon, not later. And so also there's the diplomatic support, right? Because America is the 800-ton gorilla or whatever the phrase, the cliche there at the UN Security Council. So if America and or Britain are not there sticking up for the Saudis on the UN Security Council, then they have a problem with the rest of the so-called international community. And so all in all, I guess my answer is I think that this is a really good first step in ending the war. And then I should also say, though, that this is only the horrible treasonous war for al-Qaeda against the Houthis. The war against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula remains. That's not even being addressed here. If it's being addressed, it's being addressed in the sense that we're not talking about that. We're only talking about this. And really, we've been fighting for al-Qaeda for the last 6 years. Now they're going to restart the war against them again, special ops and CIA drones, and that's going to go on, man. That's a whole different question, and there's virtually no chance that we're going to be able to stop that at this point. Because now, AQAP, who bombed the USS Cole, who helped organize the 9/11 attack, who tried to blow up the plane over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009, they're more powerful than ever. I mean, they got bazillions of dollars. They control like 7 major cities and towns in southern Yemen for like a year and a half or 2 years. Massive tax bases, military bases, and all their weapons magazines and everything. They've been fighting in the UAE's militia on the ground for years now. So whatever force they are, I don't know how to quantify it. AQAP is far more powerful than ever before. And so the war against them will be not justifiable by my standards, but will be justified by the strength of their movement now.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. I was wondering if we do pull out of Yemen, what does this mean for our foreign policy with Iran? Because, as I mentioned and you've talked about, the whole reason we got into the war with Yemen was to pacify or make the Saudis happy. If we actually pull out of this war, and Biden has talked about getting back into the nuclear deal with Iran, what does that look like?
Right. I think that's a great question. I saw a guy on Twitter responded immediately to my little thread about, my initial kind of reaction here. And he said, well, we're screwed on the Iran deal then, because either that, or if he is going to get back in the Iran deal too, he's going to call off the war in Yemen and get back in the Iran deal, then he's going to have to double down in Syria. Right. And then I was joking back that, that's right, because it's impossible to expect the Biden government to be good on 3 Shiite things at the same time, right? So
right.
If we have to placate the Saudis somehow. Who is it that we're going to kill for them? And maybe we'll start Iraq War 4 and try to roust all the Shiites out of Baghdad and give it back to the Sunnis. That's a horrible, bad joke. Don't ever quote me on that.
You got it. I won't post just that clip on Twitter. So overall, do you foresee the Biden administration being better? Let's say, to use your terms, do you see the Biden administration being worse than the Trump administration, or is it way too early to tell? Or do you think just given who he's nominated and appointed in his administration that it's destined to be just as bad as Obama? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard to say exactly. It depends on what issue. I mean, I don't see any real indication that Biden is going to end any more wars than this. And like I say, he's going to keep fighting AQAP for, 2 years before he hands it off to Kamala, whatever it is. But he already canceled the deal to get out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, right.
They put together, is a bipartisan panel led by the former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dunford, and Kelly Ayotte, who was John McCain's little fill-in for Joe Lieberman after he lost in the Senate when it was McCain and Lieberman and Graham together. When Lieberman was out, they brought in Ayat. She became the third of the three amigos of the three war hawks in the Senate. And they go, oh, well, if Kelly Ayat and Chairman Dunford, General Dunford, think that we have to stay, well, that's bipartisan. I guess that's all the cover we need to cancel Donald Trump's peace deal with the Taliban, withdraw a deal with the Taliban, and go ahead and stay. And then, but I mean, I don't know, man. I think the Taliban are going to fight. They've always been very clear about their side. And as long as the peace deal was keep the peace with us and we'll leave in a year and a half, they've abided by that. But if Joe Biden is already repudiating that deal, I expect the Taliban to go back to war. And now we've got, 2,500 to 5,000 special operations forces and, whatever few army and mercenaries there at Bagram Air Base and a few others. I mean, presumably, I'm told by knowledgeable sources that they have enough firepower at Bagram to hold off every insurgent in Central Asia from now into eternity. But I don't know, man. It seems like, at this point, you bring a powerful enough force against them, they might not have the force protection to even protect themselves. The reason that they're down to 2,500 or, that's what they say. I'm sure it's somewhat more than that. But the reason they're down to low thousands is because they're on their way out. But now you want to break the deal. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be ugly as hell. And the Taliban are bastards, man. Never heard an argument from me that like, oh, these are reasonable gentlemen we can deal with. They're not. It's just the point is they won the war and we lost it. It's their country, not ours, and enough because you already lost. But right. I don't think that, there's any reason to predict any kind of, I guess I should say it like this. If there was a chance for a negotiated settlement and a peace between the Taliban and the Kabul government, I think it's with the U.S. government out or very much on its way out, where the Kabul government then has a major incentive to go ahead and strike a good deal. But as long as they have the Americans staying, then they don't have to compromise with the Taliban at all. They have the Americans there to protect them and keep them in power, they think, at least. And so that was the great invention of the Trump administration. I mean, this is other than shaking hands with Kim Jong-un, which was heroic, and breaking that ice. And the great invention of Trump on Afghanistan was we dropped the insistence that the Taliban had to make a peace with the Afghan government or that the Afghan government had to be included in the talks. The Afghan government was excluded. We're just making a deal with the Taliban that we're leaving. And the only thing that had to do with peace with the central government there was they had to agree to talk with them. But we didn't require results and a new peace deal to go. Because, of course, then the central government could always scotch that every time. And then, but of course, I mean, I don't know if this probably wasn't sabotage. It's probably just the way they had to do it for whatever different reasons. I don't know. I mean, they could have done better, but the deal they made said we don't have to leave till May of 2021. So if Trump got reelected, then he would have seen that through almost certainly. But he was taking a big gamble right there that if he didn't get reelected, then the next president could just cancel it. And, it's kind of a side issue, but Biden cancels the deal with the Taliban. Trump canceled the deal with Iran. Obama canceled the deal with Gaddafi. Bush canceled the deal with Kim Jong-il. And for that matter, with Saddam Hussein, who was a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty at the time of the war. I mean, this is it sets a real bad precedent when America's just going around, notorious like a cliche, like Darth Vader. I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. That how is anybody supposed to respect that, much less have any confidence in any deal that they can make with the United States, But it just makes the whole country look like a son of a bitch because that's how a bad person acts. That's not how a decent man acts,
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned earlier, we're getting better on the war for terrorists, but the war against terrorists is going to remain an ongoing thing. And we actually talked about this on Twitter the other day, and I'm actually really glad you brought it up. I supported both Tulsi Gabbard in 2020 and Rand Paul in 2016, but what pissed me off about both of them is that they weren't hard on the war on terror like Ron Paul was. Ron Paul was explicit that blowback and intervention in the Middle East in the first place is why we got attacked on September 11th and why all these conflicts are ongoing. Rand Paul initially talked like that, but then by the time he started running in 2015, his rhetoric changed. You know, he said we needed to declare war on ISIS, and he was calling for additional military funding. And then, you know, Tulsi Gabbard obviously talked about how there are terrorist groups that we need to fight around the world. So you know, they were definitely the best candidate out of the field in each race. I mean, Rand Paul is miles better than Trump. Tulsi's miles better than, I guess, Bernie would be the next closest one. But that's as good as we're getting now. It seems like we're moving away from the root cause that, you know, like Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul and Mike Gravel would actually talk about. So what's up with that? Why is the war on terror kind of being forgotten and just, you know, admitted as this thing that's just going to go on forever?
Man, I think you framed that just absolutely perfectly. I mean, that is absolutely the story, right? This is who we've got. We got Rand and we got Tulsi, but neither of them got the balls to say what Ron said, which is that USA started this.
Right.
Hey, look, let me make it easy for you. Bill Clinton did this, okay? Everybody hates Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's not America. It's just that Bill Clinton kept the troops in Saudi Arabia. And Bill Clinton, at the very least, turned a blind eye, helped support the Israelis' merciless oppression of the Palestinians and the Lebanese in the 1990s. And that's what provoked the terrorists against us. Grow up, quit crying. That's the truth. You know, September 11th was not the first day in history. Unless we're going to be honest about how we got into this mess in the first place, then we're never going to get an honest answer for how we're going to get out. And what Rand Paul and Tulsi Gabbard both did, and I know Tulsi Gabbard 100% saw it. I forget exactly the circumstances of Rand doing this, but I know he did this at least a couple of times. She explicitly did this, was to say they hate us because they are Islamist extremists. And their evil Wahhabi Islamist Salafist ideology makes them want to attack us. Well, that's just a goddamn lie. It's a lie, and it's one that puts America on the defensive. It's one that says that history began in 2001 when we were attacked out of the blue by people whose religion makes them hate innocence. And so now whatever we're doing, whether it's the best way to handle it or not, we're the ones defending ourselves, and they're the ones who started it. And so, in fact, even in that context, you could admit that, yeah, there'll be some blowback, that as we fight terrorists, we will make some more terrorists. Hopefully we'll kill them faster than we make new ones. But what are we supposed to do, Reed? Refuse to defend ourselves when they started it against us? And that's not a very satisfactory answer, is it? But the truth is that no, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan backed these guys. H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton betrayed them. And then they hit us under W. Bush. And then W. Bush and Obama and essentially Trump too, but especially those first two presidents exploited that violence and that fear in order to accomplish other agendas, to get away with other things and do what it is that they want to do. And we got to be honest about that. And shame on Tulsi Gabbard for pretending that this is about Islamic extremism. She's got to know better than that. And, you know, I mean, look at, for example, how she used to pal around with John Hagee and the Cornerstone Church and all these Zionists and stuff. She moved away from a lot of that stuff. Like, not explicitly, I don't think. I've never heard her say, like, boy, I really learned a thing or two about the poor Palestinians' plight or anything like that. But she doesn't seem as bad on that stuff anymore. So, you know, she definitely is, she's a hell of a lot more of a reader than somebody like Donald Trump or something like that, you know. But you're right. I mean, she really only gets partial credit. And people should understand that in the context of the Barack Obama years and the war in Syria, that what was happening there was just absolutely crazy.
Right,
it was treason. And not just was it treason, but it was like angel dust, just batshit nuts. Like, are you kidding me? That this is your policy of backing al-Qaeda in Iraq, the bad guys from the last war, as long as the enemies they're fighting, these secular Alawites and others that they're fighting, are friends with Iran. you're willing to commit the highest treason in backing Ayman al-Zawahiri's men. Now, for a critic like me, I can tell who's who over there, right? The average Joe doesn't get it because Morning Joe won't explain it, right? But to a guy like me and the antiwar.com boys and whatever, we get it. The people in the know, the best foreign policy people on Twitter, we get it, right? The average person doesn't really have a chance to understand that. But Tulsi Gabbard, she was in Iraq War II, and she was stationed at the Balad Air Base north of Baghdad. And so the guys who were, and she was like at a medical unit, right? She was a major in a medical unit. So there are people who are wounded and dying around her, you know, horribly maimed and dying around her, fighting the Sunni insurgency in Iraq War II. The worst, most merciless, murderous part of which was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. These are the head choppers, suicide bomber, butcher, murderers. They'd go into a marketplace full of Shiite women buying, you know, vegetables, and then suicide bomb the place. And then when the medics come, just like John Brennan with his drones, then when the medics come, bomb them too, right? And these guys were butchers, and they were killing Americans too. So Tulsi Gabbard, in other words, was immersed in this part of the war. She therefore could tell the shirts from the skins. A couple of years later, just a couple of years later, she's being told that on the other side of the border, your enemy are the heroes.
Right.
And you're supposed to be too damn dumb to tell the difference, or at least just too uneducated to know who's who and why it matters. Mm-hmm. We don't call them Al-Qaeda in Iraq anymore. We call them moderate rebels now, okay? America swallows that. Congress swallows that. Sure, whatever. Assad, bad. Iran, bad. Israel, good. Whatever. Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran of the war and says, no, I'm sorry. The Sunni-based insurgency, of which Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria is the bloody vanguard edge, they are my enemy, and they always will be, right? There's a woman who can still taste the blood of her fallen comrades who fought these men, these same exact men, Reed, who had now crossed the border, okay? Not just the same group. Some of these same men from Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So now you have America is Alice in Wonderland, completely nutso, and Tulsi Gabbard is standing still and being sane, right? And saying, this is crazy. We should not be doing this.
Right.
Okay? But that means that she's only halfway to peace. Halfway. Not more than half. Right? She's just saying we should be fighting the enemy instead of fighting our enemy's enemy.
Right.
But she's not saying it's George Bush and Bill Clinton's fault that Ronald Reagan's friends are now our enemies, and we should call this whole thing off, and their violence against us will evaporate away anyway once we're not the dominant power in the Middle East, which we've got no right to be. She doesn't talk like that because she doesn't think like that. That's not her position. Her position is one of a Democrat who's a hawk, but who is smart, and not a tool of special interests who override her understanding of who her enemy is, if that is clear enough.
Yeah, she's actually said that too, right? She says, I'm a dove on regime change, but a hawk on terror. And that, whenever she said that, I actually worked on her campaign, and it would actually, it drove me nuts. And I remember you were saying you couldn't remember when Rand said it, but I remember a debate. I think it was when he was the one he got into it with Chris Christie over the no-fly zone. He said, you know, our enemy is radical Islam. Yeah. And when he said that, I was just like, no, come on.
It's Ron Paul's son.
Yeah. I mean, so what is this what causes this? Is this the Democrat and Republican Party influence? You know, if we could get
it's because they're cowards, Reed. It's because they're cowards, man. Because they're not willing to just be a man and say it to your face. Hey, look, Ronald Reagan made some mistakes.
Yeah.
Cry about it if you don't like it. Ronald Reagan made some mistakes. Every right-winger has to go run and hide in their safe space before they can fess up to the fact.
Yeah.
You know, they made Rambo 3 about how we love these guys because they killed commies. And they killed commies because they love the same God as us. Allah and God is the same God, the Hebrew God. Okay? Right. It's just they have this prophet Muhammad, but they call us the people of the book. They revere Jesus as one of the prophets in line with Solomon and David and Abraham and all of the tradition. Okay? They respect Jesus. Muhammad comes after Jesus, so that's not part of the Christian tradition at all. But they called us people of the book. And we made Rambo 3 about how we love them because they're so willing to put their lives on the line to fight like brave men against the godless Soviet communist invaders of their land. It's the same guys, and these are the Arabs that we sent to help the Afghans in that war. The same men. That's who Al-Qaeda is. And if you go, and this is the common theme throughout the book, of course, as we go from terror war to terror war to terror war, in the Philippines, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Libya, in Syria, everywhere that you have bin Ladenite groups, their founders had come from the 80s war in Afghanistan. Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, Syrian Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Abu Sayyaf out in the Philippines, of course, Al-Qaeda itself, Egyptian Islamic Jihad. All of these groups came out of America's effort to support them in the 80s against the Russians. And then, as I said, H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton turned them against us. And that doesn't indict the American people. Everybody who lives between San Diego and Bangor, Maine is somehow collectively responsible for this. That's what bin Laden said, that we were all somehow responsible for this. But he was just talking like a Democrat, right? That's just like what Madeleine Albright was saying about the Iraqis, that they're all responsible for Saddam Hussein. Right. But that's crazy. Just because Madeleine Albright and Osama bin Laden think that doesn't make that accurate. It's not a condemnation of our country, our culture, our society, other than the fact that we continue to let our government get away with this. But then I'll make an excuse for my neighbors. They lie to us all day long. Even Rand Paul, the son of Ron Paul, doesn't have the courage to tell the truth about who started the war. How's anybody else supposed to fess up to it then?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, Tulsi Gabbard introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. Mm-hmm. And I think 6 people in the House co-sponsored it, and then Rand Paul was the only senator to co-sponsor it. So even though we're admitting that they're far from perfect on this issue, when you compare them to the rest of Congress, it's insane. I mean, it just shows what a swamp we have.
That's right, and that's very fair of you to say. And I'm grading Rand on a curve, comparing him to his father, the demigod, who I essentially worship, right? But comparing him on a curve with the rest of the Senate, I don't think there's any question he's the greatest senator in American history. Right. He's probably taken the greatest and bravest stands and against the worst things than any other senator that's ever come before him. And I'm not a master historian of the Senate, but I don't know of anyone who compares to him. But compared to what he could be and should be, if he had the heart, there's just shame on him, man, for being so.
I didn't give a warning for my audience before I asked this, but everyone who's watching, if you have political heroes outside of Ron Paul, you probably don't want to watch Scott Horton too much because he's gonna crush your dreams a little bit. He said, "What is it you say? You're an equal opportunist, or you hate everyone the same?" Or I forget exactly how you put it.
I hope I don't really have a cliche about that or whatever. I just, I'm loyal to the truth only. I'm just not a partisan. Whether it's David Koresh or the Ayatollah or Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin, or, whoever it is, I'll tell the truth in defense of them if it's important to. And then if it's Rand Paul or Tulsi Gabbard or anybody that I would very much like to like, I got to be out front about just what I don't like. Because frankly, I don't have anything for sale but my honesty, right? I give my show away. The only reason anybody believes me is because they know I'm not bullshitting. And if they thought that I was pulling my punches, then nobody would trust me anyway, right? So even if I really wanted to pull my punches for Rand, I couldn't. And, just because I'd put myself out of business if I wasn't, giving people exactly what I thought the truth was. And I think that, unfortunately, he falls far short. Yeah.
No,
it's really a shame.
That's why I wanted to have you on the show, because of your honesty. The next guy I want to talk about is Justin Amash. I've seen a couple tweets you've made about him, but I've never really heard your opinion on him. So he's the first congressman to actually join the Libertarian Party while he was in office. From what I know of him, he seems a little sanction happy sometimes, and that's kind of pissed me off. He was kind of the only Liberty Republican who rightly said that Trump was not an anti-interventionist. Rand completely sold us out on that front. I mean, he was trying to tell us that Trump ending these wars, and Justin Amash was at least there saying, no, he's not. But since you are the Grim Reaper when it comes to political heroes, I wanted to get your full assessment of Justin Amash and what you think of him.
Well, I mean, again, depending on which curve you're grading him, if you're comparing him to a good libertarian, I don't think he's much of one. Compared to the average member of the House of Representatives, he's pretty damn good. If he'd stayed in the House and as a member of the LP, that would have been just fine. It would have been a lot better, especially once he knew that he wasn't running again. He should have gone ahead and switched to the LP then. It would have been a lot better publicity and whatever. There's no reason for him not to do that I know of. But, character matters. And go ahead.
I think the reason he didn't was because of impeachment. That's what I've heard. He didn't want, it didn't matter. It still ended up being a thing that was associated with him, but he didn't want to come right out of impeachment into the Libertarian Party. He wanted a gap. That's what I've heard.
That's fine. Well, and that's one of my criticisms of him. I was going to get to it later, but I'll jump to that. The fact that he said that Trump should have been impeached over the Mueller report. And then, I forget exactly. I guess he glommed on with this Ukraine, son of Russia gate, Ukraine gate BS too. But the fact that he came out and said that Trump should be removed and prosecuted over obstruction of justice of the Mueller investigation. Are you kidding me? I am sorry. I just got an entirely different take on that entire scenario. So if Trump had taken Comey and Brennan out back and shot them, I wouldn't have given a damn about that. If he duct taped them to the side of a rocket and shot them into the sun, if he confiscated all of their family's property and banished them from the USA forever, and with Robert Mueller, the pretended special prosecutor, and the whole gang at the top of the Department of Justice with him, I'd have been just fine. Drown him in the Atlantic Ocean. Nothing would have bothered me. That's not obstruction of justice. That's obstruction of a CIA, FBI, secret police, COINTELPRO op against the elected president of the United States of America. That is the highest crime virtually in political history since FDR turned a blind eye at Pearl Harbor. And those men deserve to be buried under the Supermax for daring to frame the president of the United States for treason. Give me a fucking break. And then Justin Amash wants to say Donald Trump made some phone calls about, considering asking one guy to ask someone else to back off of a thing or something. If you read the second half of that Mueller report about the obstruction, it's a joke. There's no obstruction. He didn't succeed in anything. And meanwhile, he's the president. He could have fired everybody at the Department of Justice and at the FBI and the entire special prosecutor's office. They couldn't say nothing about it. He's the chief executive, period. And they let the independent counsel statute expire. So under the independent counsel statute, he would not be able to fire. Like Clinton could not fire Ken Starr. Trump could have fired all of them. And if he was the tyrant and the guilty traitor they said he was, that's what he would have done from the beginning. Instead, what did he do? He gave them every scrap of paper he had from the very beginning. He told his lawyer, Dowd, to take every paper that the campaign had and give every bit of it to Robert Mueller and the investigators, because he knew 100% that he was 100% innocent and the whole thing was a frame-up and he was 100% not guilty. And he thought that if he only gave them everything, that they would have to admit it sooner than later. And instead, they dragged the thing on for 2 years. Somehow Amash was on the side of the CIA and the FBI, framing the elected president of the United States for treason? I'm sorry, but, personally, I never liked the guy. He just seems like a smarmy kind of a self-justifying kind of a pretentious sort of a prick to me. But then that just pissed me off so much. Give me a break. And I hate Donald Trump, man. I'm not pro-Donald Trump. But again, I defend the Ayatollah from lies too. I defend David Koresh from lies too, because lies aren't true. What the hell? And how could anybody go along with that? How could anybody go along with that? Those men that framed the president belong buried under the Supermax for daring to try that. And of course, they won't be held accountable at all. Right. But they are guilty as hell for that. But that kind of doesn't that help you kind of take Amash's temperature, that that's who he is, that that's where he came out on that? It just shows him to be lost in space to me and have his principles all wrong. And then, I don't know, man. He's just, I think he's a great Republican, Reed. I don't think he belongs in the libertarian movement because I don't think he is a libertarian. And he and Dave got into a thing on Twitter about him congratulating Biden and Kamala Harris for being inaugurated and all this. And it's like, yeah, okay, you know what? If you're a Washington, D.C. type, you're from the other party, and especially you just had a president whining and crying and stamping his feet the whole way out the door, pretending he didn't lose and all this crap, then okay, fine. I guess that's probably the right thing for Republicans in Congress to do. Go ahead and congratulate Biden and show that they recognize there's been a transfer of power now and whatever. But Amash is a member of the Libertarian Party. What purpose does it serve for him to do that? Other than what he's showing he's a gentleman, but to who? Who's he impressing with it? But meanwhile, the libertarian take on these people is quite a bit different than the Republican take. Right? The Republican take on Joe Biden is he's some kind of liberal. He's some kind of socialist. Why? He's going to raise your taxes, Reed, and he's going to sell us out to the Chi-Coms or some crap. But that's not what we think. We think that he's a war criminal, that he should already been in prison for helping to lie us in a war with Iraq, for one, right? He's the guy who should have been somehow banned from power generations ago for his crimes against the entire American order in the 1980s and 90s with his federal war on crime, which has just changed the relationship of the American people and to their states and their federal government in such negative ways it's impossible to even begin to, enumerate. Jacob Sullum at Reason Magazine before the election wrote The Case Against Joe Biden. And it is just a nightmare. Holy crap, this guy. He is just worse than you thought. Bronco Marchteach wrote a whole book, Yesterday's Man, about how horrible Biden was. Sullum doubles that in one article at Reason. Just, this guy's a monster. He doesn't deserve congratulations, not from the likes of us. Yeah. Maybe that's the right thing for somebody somewhere. But, Amash's message should have been, okay, now that you're in office, end the war in Yemen, or else, you son of a bitch, right? Or something radical, something real. I once sent a tweet to Mark Hamill. I'm sure he never read it because I'm sure he gets a lot of tweets. But I said to him, listen, man, you're Mark Hamill. What can I say? I love you, okay? And I'm glad that you're interested in politics, But instead of just saying the same thing that every Democrat has as the talking point of the day every day, you could, about, Trump this or that or whatever it is, you could say something really meaningful and powerful, man. You could talk about something really important like the war in Yemen, and bring people's attention to that instead of just giving us essentially retweeting Alyssa Milano. You're fucking Luke Skywalker, man. That's all you got to bring to the table is the same thing Alyssa Milano said about some stupid partisan thing that nobody cares about. About, yeah, Trump sure is a dummy and he sure is orange and he sure is loud and he sure is brash. Yeah. You're Luke Skywalker, man. Tell me something important. Teach me something that matters that I don't know, or show me you're leading somebody else. And especially, I'm sorry, but we're the empire killing the sand people here and shit. This is so obvious, Luke. Think about it for one moment, man. Who's who here and what we're doing here? You know, it's the same kind of thing with Justin Amash. You're supposed to be special. You know, I went after Thomas Massey on Twitter over pot. He voted no on pot. And people think this is no big deal. And Reed, you wouldn't believe how many people said to me, yeah, but there must have been some reason in the bill. There must have been a good reason, or else he wouldn't have done the wrong thing. But, man, the bill was to end prison penalties for possession and trade in weed on the federal level. Right. You're telling me that there's any possible combination of taxes in there and new regulations in there that outweigh ending the federal prosecution of people for trading in pot? There are people doing life in prison for trading in pot. Life in prison. Right. In federal prison. And people rush like he's Donald Trump. No, Scott Horton, you just don't understand. There must be a good enough reason. The good enough reason is he doesn't have any good principles. The good enough reason is he doesn't want to face his Republican constituents and tell them, no, you're wrong. This was the right thing to do. And so like Rand Paul on 10 issues and every other congressman on every other thing, he rolled over and he did the wrong thing when he should have been proud to do the right thing and tell the haters, screw you, you're wrong. How would you like if somebody kidnapped your brother and locked him in a cage for 15 years over some weed in his car? Somebody that you care about. You know, and people act like, well, weed is trivial. Weed is a silly thing. You know what happens when you smoke it? You might giggle. You might not even giggle, right? Like it gives you a nice little reverse headache. It doesn't mean anything. It's essentially meaningless. And so people think the issue is meaningless. But we're talking about people's lives being destroyed over something that's meaningless. And Thomas Massey doesn't have the courage to just do the right thing? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with just doing the right thing? And, you know, I'll tell you a Ron Paul story. In 2005, and it was the day of Hurricane Katrina, in fact. And Hurricane Katrina was the breaking point. If you remember, everybody had to love George Bush and worship and respect his wise decision-making and everything else until after Katrina. Well, this was the day of Katrina. It was Ron Paul's birthday party in Houston in August of 2005. And Ron Paul got up there. And by the way, the reason I emphasize that is because this is before he ran for president. So the place was not packed with fanboys from all over the country. There was a few of us hardcore, and then almost everyone there. I'll tell you, 9/10 of the people there were local constituents there for a little bit of barbecue and hear from their congressman. That was simple as that. And they were all a bunch of old Republicans standing around. And Ron got up there and gave him an anti-war speech. He got up there and he goes, look, man, I know you guys like George W. Bush. I know a lot of y'all have sons in the service right now. Well, I was in the service back during the days of Korea. I was a flight surgeon. A lot of you guys know that about me. And listen, the pressure on me to support George W. Bush is immense. I think you guys know that. I'm a Republican. I respect the governor, the former governor. I've met him before. He's a decent man. But I got to tell you, he's wrong about this, okay? And here's what the truth is. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan started it. H.W. Bush and Clinton turned the knife in our friends' backs and brought the violence on us. And now George Bush has exploited that crisis to make it worse, ladies and gentlemen. And you don't have to believe in it, and I don't believe in it, and that's why I'm against it, okay? It ain't because I'm not a patriot no more. It's because I am still. Get it? And they said, we get it, Ron. We get it. And even those of them that disagreed with him, they're like, they respect this man. He's their representative. And they know that they can trust him, and they believe every word out of his mouth because he never lies and he never prevaricates and he never sits there and weighs some stupid equation about if I say it just this right way, can I get away with fooling half of them into thinking I mean one thing when I mean the other? He doesn't do that. He gets up there and he goes, look, I know you guys all support the war, but I got to tell you, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And they loved it, Reed. They were like, okay, good. You know what? First time in my life I ever met a politician who respects me enough to tell me the truth to my face. I'll take it.
Yeah, so that actually perfectly segues into the last thing I wanted to ask you. It's about the Libertarian Party. So if I could wish you into the office of president, I would. And your naked truth about all this stuff is really important to me. Unfortunately, it isn't to most people, and they don't care about wars. They don't care about people getting locked in cages. They don't care about anything. They just don't care. The Republicans and Democrats are just making this shit show worse and worse every year. They're not making it any better, and we've got to win. So I think that principled, truthful voices like you are really important, but we also need to get the people who don't care about war. Like, we need to bring them in somehow. Yeah. Maybe they shouldn't be the figureheads, but we got to appeal to them. So what's your vision of a Libertarian Party? Because I know you're actually part of the party now. What's your vision of a Libertarian Party that can actually be a force for change? What do we have to do differently that we haven't been doing in the past?
Okay, well, I mean, I think Harry Brown is a great example of a presidential candidate. And times were very different in 1996 and the year 2000. So not, any kind of carbon copy type of thing. But I mean, in the general sense, he had many great qualities. Some of them were that he's a really classy and decent guy and relatable guy. You could tell he's honest. You could tell he's a gentleman. He's very Ron Paulian. Very decent dude that you're proud to be associated with, kind of a guy, So that's first. That sets a good example that this libertarianism comes from a position of morality, not licentiousness, right? This isn't the party of getting away with doing the wrong thing. This is the party of doing the right thing, and that's what we're about. I'm sorry.
Party of principle. That's what we say.
That's right. Yeah. So. And then, so one thing about Harry too is he was a brilliant genius. He knew, just like with Ron Paul, he knew what he was talking about on all of the issues, all of the time. And so it wasn't just a matter of, and this is something that happens in the Libertarian Party, especially a lot, but in the Libertarian movement, I guess, and other political movements, but there seems to be especially a symptom of the LP is you have this idea of kind of a abstract America where everything is libertarian, and wouldn't it be great if we were there, but almost entirely detached from the current crisis in America, which is centered around just how far from a libertarian America we are right now. The gap between here and there is the emergency, right? And so what we need is a presidential candidate more than any other, except congressional candidates, of course, are important too. But we need a presidential campaign in 2024 that is really centered on explaining to the American people why they are right to be concerned about what they're concerned about, but they are wrong about what they think the solution is. The solution is freedom, and here's how it will work, okay? This is how we can call off the culture war against the left and the right and all of the nth degree of fighting between in the culture war between the secularists and the Christians and the right and the left, to put it very loosely, but also the solution to the problems of essentially all of American governance, right? Come down to they have overreached. They've taken on way too much responsibility. They suck at doing everything they do. They criminalize the hell out of everything that aren't crimes. And they've turned this into a not free country. And that is what's wrong. And the left is certain that the right is the problem and the right is concerned it's the left. But the problem is the state. And the problem is the loss of liberty. And I think the right libertarian candidate preaching that message can not just help to bring people into the party and make the Libertarian Party the best party that it can be, but also we have to recognize that even after have done our very best, we're never going to be the majority of the population of the country. And right now we're probably a very small percent, between 5 and 10 or something like that, right? So, but again, if we're not talking about the libertarian America in the sky, but the real emergency of the very not libertarian America that we live in now, then the libertarians need to be the intellectual leadership for the entire American political class, left and right. And I don't mean the ruling political class, but I mean everybody who's involved and interested in politics in a meaningful way on the entire political spectrum. That, you know, you don't have to stop being a conservative. You don't have to stop being a liberal. You don't have to stop identifying with Black Lives Matter. You don't have to stop identifying as a deer hunting redneck. We just need you to stop supporting the wars overseas. We need you to stop. We need to all come together and let Wall Street know that we will all march down there and burn the whole thing to the ground if they do one more bank bailout. We're not doing bank bailouts anymore. It's 330 million Americans versus about 1,000 Americans up there who think that they get to have this money at our expense. But they need to find out now that those days are over now. And of course, always, you know, hopefully this won't be an issue by then, Reed, but a strong opposition to all of the lockdowns over the germ and everything associated with that. And then, you know, preach it on the basics. For you liberals, this is why you've got to get good on guns and attack the left from the left. For you conservatives, this is why you have got to get good on legalizing drugs and laying off. It's the same economics that say we got to keep guns legal. It's the same economics that say we got to keep cocaine legal. You know, this is the deal, that both sides have got to come. In other words, instead of the moderate center being where Biden and McCain and Clinton and all the, you know, the Bushes all agree on what horrible things to do to us, we'll have the moderate center be the libertarian movement that says this is what we're going to all agree to stop doing to each other. Right. This is what we're going to call a truce on and roll back and scale back and decentralize and go back as much as we can. I don't know, go forward to a live and let live type society where we can all be countrymen together with all being the same as each other.
Yeah.
And I think the libertarians can do that. And that's why I'm here, man. I mean, that's the whole point. I've been like this since, you know, in when I first started doing pirate radio in 1998, I think my very first show was about Waco, but it was also about the left and the right realignment and how all of my Earth First hippie friends and all of my black bloc anarchists and, you know, anarcho-commies that I was doing pirate radio with, that they and all of my right-wing militia friends in the Patriot movement and everything, we all agree on everything. Yes. We all agree on everything important. But we're supposed to hate each other when we should all be marching together. And that's the same thing now. You fast forward that 25 years and it's Black Lives Matter and Boogaloo Boys sometimes standing together with their fists together, that we are here on behalf of the civilians who want to be free, standing against the oppression of the state. And which it is what it is, right? Leftists can cry about capitalism all day, but those cops work for the government, man. You know? And so this is what I've always wanted, and it's what I've always known will never really be able to see through and accomplish. I know that the right and the left hate each other more than they hate the government, and they hate libertarians enough that they don't want to listen to us. So it's a hell of a road to hoe, but we have to try, and it's the right thing to do. And if we can get enough of the real ideological libertarians to join the Libertarian Party with a focus on, you know, running this kind of a campaign to really, you know, an evangelical campaign to wake the American people up to liberty. The kind of thing that Ron Paul accomplished in 2008 and 12 with the Ron Paul revolutions, these massive speaking tours on behalf of peace and liberty that just changed the lives of millions and millions of people. Now, I think that we can do that again. And as long as we're on this thing about the party, you know, I think probably there will be a lot of people in the Libertarian Party who feel like they're kind of being pushed aside or assaulted or taken over or some kind of thing like that. But that shouldn't really be it. I mean, I think the proper interpretation here should be that, thank God, the libertarians are here and new, younger, fresher leadership is here to make a real ruckus. And I think that there's been, for a very long time, and it's funny, man, the way so many things just go as received wisdom that just somehow everybody knows this, but they never have to explain it or prove it, and it makes no sense. But you always hear this split between the radicals and the pragmatists in the Libertarian Party. And on the face of it, as a logical kind of thing, it sounds rational that if you're just too anarchist and too radical, well, you won't get any support because the American people aren't there yet, right? And so you're just going to scare them all away with all of your crazy radicalness. And so, well, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is we should all be a bunch of warmed over Republicans who don't offend anyone and don't scare anyone and don't teach anyone anything. And yet somehow this is supposed to work because, again, it's like it's as a syllogism it works, right? As a statement, as a series of statements it works. But in practice, it doesn't really pan out this way. They're like, look, if the radical approach is counterproductive, then the pragmatic approach must be the productive way to go about it. But that doesn't make any sense either, because why would anybody vote for a warmed over Republican when there's a hot Republican, ready to go? There's an actual Republican in the race who has somewhere around a 50% chance of winning who could be voted for. So if, especially as most people do, they vote defensively, right? They don't really like the Republicans, but they hate the Democrats more this year, or vice versa, right? So if they want to keep the Democrats out, why would they vote for a Libertarian instead of just voting for a Republican when there's already a Republican in the race if the two are indistinguishable from each other? So this is the idea that has essentially the LP right now on a course to nominate Justin Amash. Mm-hmm. Well, Justin Amash is going to get up there in 2024 and say, and no offense, Justin, I like you, but you should be better. But, he's going to get up there and he's going to say libertarian things, but he's not going to say it in a way that changes anybody's heart or changes anybody's mind or really helps to lead the American people kind of anywhere. And then maybe because he's got a famous name, he'll get on TV and maybe he'll get extra kind of surplus of protest votes the way Gary Johnson did when it was Trump versus Hillary, and he got some protest votes. But that won't represent really a moving of the libertarian ball forward on the field at all. It's just like with Gary Johnson. Those were just protest votes. They didn't transfer into new Libertarian Party membership or Libertarian movement membership really either. And so I just think it's a false dichotomy. I think the pragmatists have a point if being an anarchist means doing a striptease on C-SPAN, or if being an anarchist means you get out there and you put legalizing prostitution as the highest priority of the Libertarian Party and movement or whatever, which I'm totally for, by the way. But, or if you, as a certain friend of ours and former candidate insisted on doing, putting abolishing Medicare as the highest priority of his campaign. Why are you a libertarian? Well, because I hate poor people more than anyone else. And the more helpless you are, the more I want to take away the slightest bit of help that you get when you and I and everyone knows we live in a system that is entirely tilted toward the people who've already made it. But if you haven't made it and you have nothing, I'm picking on you first because F you. Okay? If the pragmatists think that is a stupid way to be an anarchist, and that is counterproductive, then I'm 100% with them, okay? That is stupid and wrong. But being an anarchist, or not even an anarchist, but being a radical and being a hard ass for liberty doesn't mean you have to have a silly pet project about yo-yos or any other thing, right? You could be a hardcore radical libertarian, but the agenda is ending all wars, ending all lockdowns, ending all bank bailouts and corporate welfare, ending all of the federal war on drugs and any federal help for the state wars on drugs in any way immediately, and demilitarizing the police, and on the most important crises facing the country, the things that really matter to everybody else. And so, in other words, I hear what the pragmatists are saying, but I think that their presumptions are too much, and their practice does not bear out. Their practice as running as, well, I'm pretty much a Republican, but also I don't care if people do drugs, is not going to get you votes. It's just not.
Yeah.
It never has.
You literally just laid out my entire message that I've had since I started this show, the idea of unity, that we all want the same thing, and that we need to unify behind the important issues that everyone wants to end. That's You just summed it up perfectly. I know you got to go. I think you should get Justin Amash on your show if he'd be willing to do it. I think that would be great. I know he's going on Michael Malice's show. He's going on Dave's show. If you could get him, and
my show's really not about stuff like that, man. My show is really just focused on what the American government is doing overseas and that kind of deal. I very rarely break off into, these kinds of internal discussions. I'm happy to be interviewed about them, and I have my opinions. And as I know, I'm very close with Dave and Michael Heiss and the guys in the Mises Caucus and all that. But I strongly encourage all libertarians, not necessarily Mises Caucus, but all libertarian movement types. There's always been for so long, speaking of dichotomies, there's been this huge dichotomy between the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party. And oftentimes, people in the Libertarian Party don't even know that there is a libertarian movement that's not the Libertarian Party, believe that or not, where we're just so isolated from each other. And but I think that we can do better than that. And frankly, no offense to Badnarik, or I don't care about Barr, but no offense to Johnson or Joe, but we haven't had a Harry Brown since 2000. And what we need is somebody who is impressive, who gets up there, who knows what the hell he's talking about for real, who has depth of knowledge on all of the topics, and has the heart and the mind for the understanding of what matters. We don't need a Rand. Sorry, Justin Amash. We don't need Rand. We need Ron Paul. That's what we need. And, I think we all know who's running it. It's going to work. It's going to be great, Reed.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens over the next few years. Thanks for coming on, man. And everyone should go. You got a new book out, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. I haven't read it yet, but I've been listening to your summaries on YouTube. I'm a truck driver, so I don't have a lot of time to read. I'm a listener.
Audiobook coming soon, buddy.
All right. Well, I will definitely get a copy of that and listen to it. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll have to get you back on again. Everyone, go watch this guy. He knows what he's talking about, and you will get nothing but the truth.
Thanks, Reed. Happy to do it.